A chance encounter. David had always been fascinated by the unknown, which is why he found himself at the sprawling intergalactic space station, a nexus for beings from all corners of the cosmos. As he wandered through the crowded halls, his gaze was constantly drawn upward to the intricate architecture that spiraled into the heights, a marvel of engineering designed to accommodate the myriad species that frequented it. He stopped by a stall selling ancient artifacts from a dozen worlds, each with its own history and mystery. The owner, a four-armed Glorosian, chattered away about each item with an infectious enthusiasm. David listened intently, his eyes occasionally scanning the crowd. It was then he saw her. She stood out not because she was doing anything particularly unusual, but because of her serene demeanor amidst the chaos of the marketplace. Her skin shimmered with an iridescent quality that caught the light, casting colorful shadows on the ground beside her. Curiosity piqued, David approached her, his footsteps echoing slightly on the metallic floor. "Hello," he said, offering a smile. "I'm David. I couldn't help but notice. Are you from the Lycidian sector?" She turned to face him, her eyes wide with a hint of surprise. "Yes, I am," she replied, her voice melodic yet unfamiliar with the accent. "I'm Lyra. It's rare to meet someone who can guess that." David chuckled. "I'm a historian by trade. I tend to pick up on little details like that. What brings you to this lively place?" Lyra's lips curve into a soft smile. "I am here to learn, much like you. The station is a crossroads of cultures and knowledge, after all." Intrigued by her thoughtful response, David gestured toward a nearby cafe. "Would you care to join me for a drink? I'd love to hear more about what you're studying." Accepting his invitation, Lyra followed him to the cafe, where they found a quiet table away from bustle. As they sat, a server quickly attended to them, taking their order for 2 cups of the local specialty, a warm, spiced beverage reputed to be calming. With their drinks in hand, David leaned in, eager to continue their conversation. "So, Lyra, what exactly are you hoping to learn here?" "I am particularly interested in the art of communication," she explained. "In my culture, much is conveyed through gestures and the subtleties of movement, less through words." "That's fascinating," David remarked, genuinely intrigued. "Human communication can often rely too heavily on words. Sometimes we forget the power of silence or a simple touch." Lyra nodded thoughtfully. "Yes, I've observed that during my time here. It's quite different from what I am used to." Their conversation deepened, branching from cultural norms to personal anecdotes. David shared stories of his travels to various archaeological sites across the galaxy, while Lyra recounted her experiences growing up on her homeworld, a place David had only read about in his studies. As the hours slipped by, unnoticed by both, a connection formed, not just of minds, but of spirits intrigued by each other's vastly different yet surprisingly similar lives. David found himself enchanted not only by Lyra's knowledge but by her perspective, so distinct from anyone he had ever met. Eventually, they parted ways with a promise to meet again the next day. As David watched her disappear into the crowd, he felt a sense of anticipation he hadn't experienced in a long time. In the embrace of an alien station among countless strangers, he had found a singular connection, a promising start to what might be an extraordinary friendship. Chapter 2: The Language of Gestures. The next morning, David was up early, his mind replaying the previous day's conversation with Lyra. He had arranged to meet her at the station's grand library, a repository of knowledge with archives that stretched into what seemed like infinity. When he arrived, Lyra was already there, browsing through a digital manuscript illuminated with strange symbols. She looked up and smiled as David approached. "Good morning, David," she greeted, her voice carrying a calmness that set the tone for the day. "Morning, Lyra," David replied, his eyes briefly scanning the manuscript. "What are you reading?" "It's an ancient dialect from my planet," she explained, moving aside to make room for him. "I thought it might be interesting to show you how our written language pairs with our gestures." Fascinated, David leaned closer to observe. The characters were fluid, almost artistic. "It looks beautiful," he remarked. "Is it similar to how you communicate verbally?" Lyra nodded, then stood up to demonstrate. "Our words often require accompanying movements to fully convey meaning," she said, her hands gracefully accentuating her words. "For example, this gesture," she arched her arm in a slow, deliberate motion, "can signify the concept of learning or knowledge." "That's incredible," David said, watching her movements with keen interest. "It adds a whole layer of meaning." Encouraged by his curiosity, Lyra continued to teach David basic gestures, turning the session into an impromptu lesson. As they practiced, another figure approached them, a fellow human named Marco, who David recognized as a cultural anthropologist. "David, Lyra, good to see you both so engaged this morning," Marco said, a friendly grin on his face. "What are you two up to?" "We're just exploring Lyra's culture's use of gestures," David replied. "It's quite remarkable." Marco's eyes lit up with interest. "Mind if I join? Gestural languages are a particular interest of mine." "Of course," Lyra responded, pleased. The three of them spent the next hour exchanging knowledge and experiences. Marco shared insights from other cultures he had studied, while Lyra demonstrated more complex concepts from her own. As they interacted, the bond between them strengthened through their shared fascination with cultural expressions. They decided to move to a nearby cafe within the library, a space filled with the quiet murmur of dozens of scholars and the subtle aroma of coffee. Seated with their drinks, the conversation shifted from academic to personal. Marco shared stories of his travels to distant galaxies, each tale punctuated by laughter or reflective silence. Lyra spoke of her dreams to bridge understanding between her secluded world and the broader universe, while David expressed his hope to one day compile a comprehensive guide to the lost languages of the galaxy. The time flew by, and soon it was mid-afternoon. They agreed to meet regularly, forming a small but dedicated group committed to exploring and understanding the vast cultures represented on the space station. As they parted ways, David felt a profound sense of fulfillment. Not only had he learned more about Lyra and her intriguing culture, but he had also made a new friend in Marco. The station, a hub of alien life and the unknown, had suddenly become a place of deep connections and learning. Walking back to his quarters, David couldn't help but feel that the station was no longer just a place of transit or research. It was a place where bonds were forged, where the language of gestures spoke louder than words, and where every day promised new discoveries and friendships. Chapter 3: The First Connection. The intergalactic station's nocturnal cycle began, casting soft lights over its gardens, a favorite spot for those who sought peace after the station's daytime flurry. David had suggested this spot for his next meeting with Lyra, thinking the serene environment would offer a perfect backdrop for deeper conversation. He found her already there, seated on a bench under a luminescent tree whose leaves shimmered with bioluminescent hues. "Lyra, this place looks even more beautiful at night," David remarked as he approached. "It does," Lyra agreed, her face reflecting the tree's gentle glow. "It's quiet. It allows for thoughts to flow freely." David sat beside her, both of them taking a moment to enjoy the tranquil atmosphere. Breaking the silence, he asked, "How did you find your passion for intercultural communication?" Lyra turned to him, her expression thoughtful. "It began when I was young. My planet is quite isolated. I always wondered what lay beyond our skies, who else was out there. When I first heard of this station, I knew I needed to come here to learn, to share." "That's a brave decision," David said, admiring her adventurous spirit. "Leaving one's home to face the unknown takes courage." Their conversation meandered through various topics, each sharing their dreams and the paths that had led them to the station. As the night deepened, their talk gradually shifted from intellectual exchanges to more personal revelations. At one point, David hesitated, then said, I've never felt quite as understood as I do when I'm with you. It's like you see right through to the heart of things." Lyra's response was a soft smile. "I feel the same, David. There's a harmony in our conversations that I've rarely found elsewhere." Encouraged by her words, David reached out, tentatively taking her hand. The contact was gentle, exploratory. Lyra did not pull away. Instead, she reciprocated, her touch light but affirming. "May I?" David asked quietly, leaning closer. At her nod, he brushed a strand of hair away from her face, then slowly, respectfully, moved to kiss her. It was a brief kiss, a mere graze of lips, but it spoke volumes. Lyra's breath caught slightly when they parted. That was unexpected," she murmured, though her eyes shone with unspoken emotions. "I hope it was not unwelcome," David said, concern flickering through his voice. "No, not unwelcome. Just new," she assured him, her hands squeezing his reassuringly. They spent a few moments in comfortable silence, each processing the step they had just taken. Finally, Lyra spoke. "This connection we have, it's rare, isn't it?" "It is," David agreed. "And I think it's worth exploring." With a mutual understanding, they rose from the bench, hands still joined. They decided to walk through the gardens, their steps unhurried. As they walked, they discussed plans to visit other sections of the station, to continue their exploration of each other's worlds. Their newfound intimacy changed the dynamic of their relationship, adding a layer of closeness that neither had anticipated but both welcomed. The station, a meeting place for countless species and cultures, now held a new significance for them. It was no longer just a place of study, but a beginning of something deeply personal. As the station's artificial stars twinkled above, mirroring the real ones hidden by the vast structure, David and Lyra continued their walk, their shadows merging and mingling on the path beneath the radiant foliage. The night was still young, and so was their journey together, filled with possibilities and the promise of shared tomorrows. Chapter 4. Deepening Bonds. David and Lyra had agreed to explore one of the more unusual features of the Intergalactic Space Station, the Environmental Simulation Center. This facility could mimic the climate and atmosphere of any known planet, offering visitors a chance to experience different worlds without leaving the station. Today, they had chosen to simulate the environment of David's home planet, Earth. As they entered the simulation room, a gentle breeze carrying the scent of fresh grass and soil greeted them, and the sound of birds chirping filled the air. "This feels like Earth?" Lyra asked, looking around with wide eyes at the expansive blue sky and the green fields that stretched out before them. "It's very close," David said, a nostalgic smile tugging at his lips. "The air, the smells, even the sounds are almost perfect. They've done a good job with the simulation." They walked through the meadow, the grass brushing against their legs. David pointed out various earth plants and explained their uses and significance in human culture. Lyra listened intently, absorbing every detail, her fascination evident. After a while, they settled down under a large oak tree, its digital leaves rustling softly overhead. Lyra turned to David, her expression curious. "Tell me more about your family, David. What was it like growing up on Earth?" David shared stories of his childhood, describing the bustling city life, the quiet, cozy evenings with his family, and his early fascination with the stars that eventually led him to his career as a historian. As he talked, Lyra's hand found his, an unspoken gesture of comfort and connection. "What about you, Lyra? What was your family like?" David asked, returning the intimacy of sharing personal histories. Lyra's eyes held a hint of melancholy as she spoke. "My family valued knowledge above all. We were taught from a young age to pursue understanding and peace. It's a beautiful way to live, but it can be isolating too, which is why I left to find connections elsewhere." David squeezed her hand, acknowledging her sentiment. "I think you're incredibly brave for stepping out into the universe to find those connections." Their conversation drifted to discussions about their aspirations and fears, weaving a tapestry of shared vulnerabilities and strengths. As the simulated sun began to set, casting long shadows across the meadow, David felt a profound connection deepening between them, rooted in mutual respect and empathy. As dusk fell, the simulation began to transition into night, stars appearing in the twilight sky. "It's beautiful," Lyra whispered, her gaze upward. "It is," David agreed, his voice low. "But not as beautiful as the real thing. Maybe one day I could show you." Lyra smiled at that, her face illuminated by the starlight. "I'd like that." They stood together, watching the simulated night deepen, the stars twinkling above them. The digital world around them felt almost forgotten, overshadowed by the real emotions and connections being forged. Eventually, they left the simulation center, walking side by side back to the main areas of the station. Their steps were unhurried, each moment together precious. They talked about visiting other simulations, exploring not just the universe but each other's pasts and dreams. As they neared the residential quarters, David stopped and faced Lyra. "Today was special, Lyra. Thank you for sharing it with me." Lyra reached up, touching his cheek softly. "Thank you, David, for making me feel so at home here, away from home." Their journey back was quiet, reflective, each lost in thoughts about the day and the many days they hoped would follow. In the simulated Earth and under the fabricated stars, they had found something real, a bond that promised to grow, to challenge, and to nurture them both in ways they had scarcely imagined. Chapter 5. Cultural Revelations. The academic conference had drawn scholars from across the galaxy, filling the station's main auditorium with a buzz of intellectual excitement. David and Lyra had decided to attend together, both keen to explore new academic insights and share their own experiences. As they entered the bustling conference hall, David scanned the schedule. "There's a panel on interspecies communication that looks interesting," he suggested, showing Lyra the digital program. That sounds perfect, Lyra replied, her eyes lighting up with interest. It aligns well with what I've been studying. They found seats just as the panel was about to start. The speakers were an eclectic group, including a renowned psychologist from a water planet and a linguistics expert from a species known for their complex vocal patterns. Throughout the discussion, David and Lyra listened intently, occasionally whispering to each other their thoughts and observations. When the panel opened up for questions, David nudged Lyra. You should ask about integrating nonverbal cues into standard communication protocols. With a nod, Lyra raised her hand and, once given the nod by the moderator, posed her question. Her clear, concise inquiry sparked a lively debate among the panelists about the challenges and opportunities of such integration in multicultural settings. After the panel, they were approached by Dr. Henrik, a human sociologist David respected greatly. David, that was an insightful question your friend asked, Dr. Henrik commented, turning to Lyra with a friendly smile. I'm Dr. Henrik, and you are? Lyra, pleased to meet you, she responded, shaking his hand. Dr. Henrik invited them for coffee, and they soon found themselves at a quiet table in the corner of the conference center's cafe. Over steaming cups of a local blend, the conversation deepened. Dr. Henrik was particularly interested in Lyra's background and her unique perspective on nonverbal communication. Lyra, had you considered publishing your findings? Dr. Henrik asked after she explained some of her observations and theories. I have, though I'm still gathering substantial data, Lyra admitted. I'd be interested in collaborating with you, Dr. Henrik proposed, his eyes twinkling with enthusiasm. Your insights could be groundbreaking in the field of interspecies relations. Lyra looked at David, seeking his opinion. David's supportive smile gave her the confidence she needed. I would like that very much, she said, turning back to Dr. Henrik. Thank you. As they wrapped up their meeting, David felt a surge of pride for Lyra. Her intellect and passion for her culture and research were making waves, and he was thrilled to be by her side. Exiting the cafe, they decided to walk through one of the station's botanical gardens to decompress. The air was fresh with the scent of alien flora, creating a serene atmosphere. Today was incredible, Lyra, David said as they meandered along the path lined with glowing plants. Dr. Henrik's offer is a fantastic opportunity. It is, Lyra agreed, her voice filled with a mix of excitement and nervousness. I'm just glad you were there with me. David stopped, taking her hands in his. I'll always be here, Lyra. And I can't wait to see where your research goes from here. They spent the rest of their walk discussing potential ideas for the collaboration and how they could integrate their work. The future seemed bright with possibility, and as they headed back to their quarters, their shared dreams for academic and personal growth felt deeply intertwined. Under the stars of the station, with the soft hum of the night cycle beginning, David and Lyra walked hand in hand, their hearts and minds as aligned as ever. Chapter 6: The Crisis of Difference. David had always dreamed of visiting Lyra's homeworld, and when she invited him to accompany her on a short visit, he couldn't resist the opportunity. The planet, with its unique customs and isolated location, was rarely visited by outsiders. As their ship descended through the atmosphere, Lyra pointed out various landmarks visible from above. That's the Valley of Echoes, she explained, her voice filled with pride. It's said that one can hear the whispers of our ancestors there. David listened intently, absorbing every detail. When they landed, he was struck by the stark beauty of the landscape, vast plains under a violet sky, dotted with towering crystalline structures. They were greeted by a delegation of Lyra's people, who welcomed David with a formal but warm ceremony. He tried his best to remember the gestures Lyra had taught him, hoping to show his respect for their customs. As the visit progressed, David experienced a mixture of awe and mild alienation. The cultural differences were more profound than he had anticipated, and he often found himself struggling to adapt to the unfamiliar social norms and etiquette. One evening, after a particularly challenging day of misunderstandings, David and Lyra walked through a luminescent forest near her family's home. The light from the bioluminescent plants cast an ethereal glow on their path, creating an almost otherworldly atmosphere. I can see you're trying hard, Lyra said gently, noticing David's quiet mood. It's not easy stepping so completely into another world. David sighed, running a hand through his hair. I want to understand, to connect with your world as you have with mine. But it's hard, feeling so out of place. Lyra stopped and faced him, her expression serious. David, it's okay to feel overwhelmed. These differences between us, they're real and they're significant. But they don't have to divide us. David nodded, grateful for her understanding. I know. It's just a lot to process. They continued walking in silence for a few minutes before Lyra spoke again. Maybe it's not just about understanding each other's worlds, but finding our own place within them. A place that's uniquely ours, built from both our cultures. That sounds like a beautiful idea, David replied, a smile slowly forming on his face. Finding common ground where there's none apparent. Yes, exactly, Lyra said, her face lighting up with a hopeful smile. Let's start small. Maybe with something symbolic, something that represents both our worlds. Inspired, they spent the rest of their walk discussing what that symbol could be. A piece of art, a shared ritual, or even a new tradition they could start together. As they planned, David felt his spirits lift. The differences between their worlds, while vast, were also a source of richness and potential. By embracing these differences, they could create something new, something that bridged their worlds in a meaningful way. The trip ended with David feeling more connected to Lyra than ever. Despite the initial difficulties, the journey had strengthened their bond, turning the crisis of difference into a deep shared commitment to understanding and unity. As their ship lifted off from Lyra's planet, David took one last look at the violet sky and the crystalline landscapes. He knew he would return, not just as a visitor, but as someone who had found a second home, a place where the joining of two cultures could flourish. Chapter 7: The Commitment. Back on the space station, David and Lyra had decided to celebrate their new understanding and commitment by creating a shared space that represented both their cultures. They chose a quiet corner in one of the station's communal gardens, a place frequented by many for contemplation and connection. As they walked through the garden, selecting the perfect spot, David carried a small sapling from Earth, a resilient oak. Lyra had a delicate, luminous vine from her planet, known for its ability to thrive in any environment. This spot looks perfect, David said, pointing to a space near a gentle waterfall, whose soothing sounds filled the air with calm. Yes, it does, Lyra agreed, looking around appreciatively. The sound of water is considered sacred on my planet. It's a symbol of life and continuous learning. Together, they began to plant the oak and the vine side by side. As they worked, they were joined by Marco, who had heard about their project and was eager to help. This is a fantastic idea, Marco commented as he helped stabilize the oak, creating something new from both worlds. It's a powerful symbol. We hope it will grow into a place where others can come to find peace and maybe a little understanding of our cultures, Lyra explained, patting the soil around the vine. As they worked, other station residents stopped by, curious about the activity. David and Lyra took turns explaining their project, and soon their small gathering turned into an impromptu celebration of unity and cultural exchange. With the plants firmly in the ground, David stepped back to look at their handiwork. It's a start, a foundation, he said with a satisfied nod. It is, Lyra agreed, her eyes reflecting the garden's greenery. And like any good relationship, it will need care and nurturing. Marco, who had been listening, smiled. You two are quite the pair. You're teaching us all a lesson in harmony. As the sun set, casting long shadows over the garden, the group decided to commemorate the occasion with a small ceremony. One of the station's elder inhabitants, a wise old being known for his philosophical insights, was asked to speak. In the embrace of an alien, a human finds forever, the elder began, his voice echoing softly in the quiet garden. This garden, this tree, and this vine, they are more than just plants. They are a testament to the power of connection, of two very different beings coming together to create something new and beautiful. The words resonated with everyone present, and as the ceremony concluded, there was a sense of collective contentment. People from different backgrounds and species mingled, sharing stories and laughter, drawn together by David and Lyra's example. After the guests had left, David and Lyra remained, sitting beside their newly planted tree and vine. What we've started here, it's just the beginning, isn't it? David mused, taking Lyra's hand. It is, Lyra confirmed, leaning her head on his shoulder. Today, we planted a tree and a vine, but what grows from them will be our legacy, a legacy of unity and shared dreams. Under the stars of the space station, with the gentle rustle of leaves and the murmur of the waterfall, David and Lyra sat together, their hearts and hopes intertwined like the roots of the oak and the vine. In that shared space, they found not only a commitment to each other, but a commitment to a greater understanding between their peoples. Chapter 8: A New Dawn. The morning aboard the station was quiet. the artificial lights mimicking the soft hues of sunrise on Earth. David stood in the docking bay, gazing at the sleek exploration vessel that gleamed under the hangar lights. It was a symbol of their next adventure, a journey into uncharted space. Lyra approached, her steps light but purposeful. "The ship's ready," she said, her voice carrying a mix of excitement and apprehension. "Everything we need is aboard." David turned to her, his face breaking into a reassuring smile. "And the crew? How do they feel about our mission?" "They're eager," Lyra replied. "Most of them have never worked on an interspecies team before, but they're optimistic. This is new for all of us." The team they had assembled was small but diverse. Humans, members of Lyra's species, and a few others from the station who shared their passion for exploration and understanding. The ship, named Unity, was equipped for long-term exploration, with state-of-the-art technology designed to adapt to various environments. As they walked toward the ship, Marco emerged from the vessel, his arms loaded with supplies. "I hope you two aren't planning to just stand there looking heroic," he teased. "There's still work to be done." David laughed. "We were just admiring your hard work, Marco. It's a shame we can't all be as efficient as you." Marco rolled his eyes good-naturedly and gestured toward the cargo hold. "There's plenty of room for admiration after we finish loading. Let's get to it." The three of them worked together, hauling equipment and supplies onto the ship. The atmosphere was filled with laughter and banter, a reflection of the camaraderie they had built over the past weeks. Other crew members joined in, sharing stories of their own worlds and their excitement for the journey ahead. As the final crate was secured, the team gathered in the ship's main lounge for a pre-launch briefing. David stood at the head of the table, his voice steady as he addressed the group. "We're about to embark on something extraordinary. This isn't just about exploration, it's about connection. We're going to places no one has been, and we're doing it together as a team." Lyra added, her tone warm and inclusive. "Each of us brings something unique to this mission. Our differences are our strength. Let's remember that as we move forward." The crew nodded, their expressions a mix of determination and excitement. With the briefing complete, they prepared for launch. David and Lyra took their places on the bridge, the hum of the ship's systems filling the air. "Ready?" David asked, glancing at Lyra. "Ready," she replied, her hand hovering over the control panel. With a final glance at the station through the viewport, David gave the command. "Let's go." The ship lifted smoothly from the docking bay, its engines humming as it ascended into the vast expanse of space. The stars stretched endlessly before them, a canvas of infinite possibilities. As the station grew smaller in the distance, David leaned back in his chair, a sense of calm washing over him. "This is it," he said softly. "The beginning of something new." Lyra reached over, her hand finding his. "Together," she said, her voice filled with quiet conviction. The journey wasn't without its challenges. The crew navigated uncharted systems, encountered phenomena they could hardly comprehend, and faced moments of uncertainty. But with every challenge, they grew closer, their bonds strengthening through shared experiences and mutual respect. One evening, after a particularly harrowing encounter with a gravitational anomaly, the crew gathered in the observation deck to decompress. The room was quiet, the only sound the soft hum of the ship as it glided through space. David stood by the viewport, his gaze fixed on the swirling nebula beyond. Lyra joined him, her presence grounding him. "It's beautiful," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It is," David agreed, turning to look at her. "And it's even more beautiful knowing we're seeing it together." Lyra smiled, her hand brushing against his. "I think we're starting to find our place out here." Their connection was undeniable, a partnership forged not only by love but by a shared purpose. In the vast emptiness of space, they had found something rare, a union that transcended species, culture, and the boundaries of their respective worlds. As the ship continued its journey, the crew worked tirelessly, cataloging new discoveries and sharing moments of wonder. Every star system, every alien world they encountered added to their understanding of the universe and their place within it. David and Lyra's relationship deepened with each passing day. They found solace in each other's company, their shared dreams driving them forward. They were partners in every sense, navigating the challenges of exploration with unwavering trust and mutual respect. One evening, as they stood together on the observation deck, Lyra turned to David and said, "You know, in the embrace of the unknown, we found something incredible." David nodded, his gaze steady. "And in the embrace of an alien, a human finds forever." Their journey was far from over, but in that moment, They knew they had found something timeless. Together, they would continue to explore, to learn, and to create a future that was as boundless as the stars themselves.